Hey guys, I just quickly wanted to go over some web app framework things I've been learning about this semester. So, why framework matters? Really, it's just about organizing our projects. Whether it comes down to just the easy team management or just navigating our projects, we want it to be very simple and very easy. We don't want to be getting lost in where we're placing things or having them be too difficult or not being able to do links and things correctly because we've complicated our framework system too much. But there's also assistance in making it a little more complex. That way, we're not just having these huge, kind of blended files that just have all the work we've done. So those are just some of the reasons why it matters. And then for the repository setup, I like to explain it kind of like a home directory setup in Linux. So for Linux, we have a home file system. And basically what you do with that is the computer will just point to that and it knows all the files are in home. And for our projects, we essentially want to do the same thing. We want to have a home directory that we're kind of basing everything into. And in that home directory, we're going to have a source folder usually is fairly helpful. And then an index HTML or kind of that home page HTML that works very well in the home directory. And then any miscellaneous kind of smaller or maybe more random files like a git ignore or a package JSON or README, all those can go into kind of that home directory we have when we set up our repositories. And the next one is kind of that source folder. Let's dive into what that may hold. There's kind of three categories of things you usually can organize things into. You can also find more if need be. But essentially, we want to organize things into assets, which is everything that's going to be related to the code on the page. So, kind of the page content, whether that's HTML, CSS, images, things like that. Those all work very well in assets. And data is going to just be any data we're kind of saving with the website. So any work we do with for databases maybe of the website, or if we're saving data to a file, anything like that can belong in that data folder or data kind of category. And then the JS is just JavaScript. Any JavaScript stuff we do, we can also put in that category. And then we want to divide these up and organize them in a way where we can easily navigate and easily organize it and add to it without getting too complex or too lost. And some of the other key factors we want to keep in mind are security. We want to make sure that we're not sharing things with our repository that are random, and often a good keyframe can prevent kind of some of those mistakes. Good base, kind of that home directory stuff we went over, the development environment and programs that may change what type of framework you need. Really, it all kind of depends. Even the design can get it to change. But those are just things to kind of keep in mind as you're choosing your framework is you just want to have all those in mind. And then let's dig into the example. So I created an empty kind of a just directory to show off kind of what the design of a web app can look like. So for this one, we can see I've included source in there, and then I also have the index HTML and then some of those extra files we were talking about. So the index HTML, we can see fairly simple. I didn't add too much here, but one of the things I wanted to point out was this base. And we can see essentially all that does is now this whole HTML is specifically going to be pointing towards the base. And for an example, sometimes if we don't do this, if you uh, add the directory somewhere else, or depending on what program you're using, it won't always find the files because it is pointing to a different base than what we currently have. So that's just something to be aware of. First source, we can see we have in assets, we have some CSS. And we've kind of covered it in our class, so I won't dig in too much, but kind of just style CSS and adding partials and stuff. I thought that was really cool. So we can kind of have a whole folder for things like that. We have a whole HTML folder for any of the pages we're adding. And then I specifically added images. I think that's a great place to keep it is just in that assets folder. Just the content of the page is kind of everything I put specifically in there. And then for data, we just have an empty JSON file here, for example, but you can add whatever files you want. to navigate data. Maybe it'll be more complex and you'll have to do more things, but you can definitely add that under data. You just want to keep that organization kind of like our assets folder and keep that under data as well. For JS, we just have our JavaScript and we have the main JS, and then I like to do it. I read a few different options, but I thought this one was pretty good. Was that when you do a function with JavaScript, you create a new JavaScript file to hold that function, and you can put that under functions, and then main.js and we'll just import all the export functions that we need in this functions directory so we can run our website. So this is kind of just a basic layout. Obviously, it can be more complex or more simplified for whatever you're going, but I've discovered that I think this is the best way to kind of set up something where we're going to build. And especially for us where we're doing a web app, I really like this design because we may attempt to move to mobile or something like that. And having a really easy to navigate site makes it a lot easier in trying to transfer those things or figuring out where certain information is. So I hope you guys enjoyed this. And yeah, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out.